Report on this computer. There we go. All right. Let's move on.
All right, so we had case study 2. Well, we all did. A letter to the community. Go ahead, Mary.
Right, Phil. So we've nicknamed this "Don't Monkey Around with the Federal Money" after you from last cohort's recording, Dr. Lamb. So in the case study, the superintendent piloted a student-based budgeting at 4 schools the previous school year. And he is wanting to roll it out district-wide this year. And student-based budgeting allocates money based on the number of enrolled students and their needs, which is not the traditional or the okay way to do it. So he says that student needs, grade level at risk will have predominant weight. That translates into dollars, which cannot happen. So his plan again is to roll it out. His argument was not all schools are the same. And with the new system, the money will be following the students and the school goals. And the letter invites parents to be engaged and involved in this process.
So when we dug a little bit deeper, we know that the principal's role is to make available school budgets and improvement plans to the public. We have unempowered school boards. So when they need money, they have to go through the county commissioners because they're the funding authority for local school districts, and they fund all capital projects. The states give districts per pupil money. Local boards can get more money from county commissioners, but they all get the same amount from the federal.
Federal and state's all the same. That is correct.
Federal and state. State can't vary level of federal money, and local district can't vary the level of federal money.
So with the Leandra case, basically what happened is there were 5 districts in North Carolina, and I believe they were the lowest 5 in terms of income. And they went to the courts and said basically that larger districts where there's a higher income are able to add to their per pupil spending. And the districts with lower income were spending all of their money in capital funds because they'd had the disempowerment. So they were having to use local funds. And that was a cause back in the 60s when segregation happened. A desegregation of schools happened, the states pulled out of capital funding. So basically poor counties were spending all of their money trying to keep the buildings open and had no excess money to fund pupil spending, per pupil spending. So they went to the Supreme Court of North Carolina and basically said that it needs to be kind of a steal from the rich to give to the poor. So there should be equal funding across all of them. So basically, if a larger county is able to spend an extra $5,000 on their students, then they should take some of the money given by the state or the federal government away from them and give it to the poorer counties who can't afford to do that for their students. So if you'll go to the next slide real quick. There we go. So basically the ruling for that in Leandra versus state is that neither the school districts or the counties have any constitutional right to equal funding. And the North Carolina children do have a fundamental state constitutional right to receive a basic sound education. So basically what that means is every child has a right to an education, and every student's going to get the same amount of money spent on them regardless of where they live and the income of the area that they're in. So they're not going to reallocate funds based on the wealth of a county. So based on this ruling, again, to reiterate what Elizabeth said, no one at any level, state, local, superintendent, is allowed to move money around to each school per pupil, including the district superintendent in this particular case. What the state gives you per pupil is what you have to spend per pupil unless your district can supplement otherwise.
Okay, so for the questions to consider, the first one is the superintendent's plan appropriate and to present both sides of the issue? Well, no, it's not appropriate because as Heather has said and Elizabeth, they can't do that. They can't move money around. He was trying to do what was right by those students, but if he wanted, you know, I guess extra money per pupil, he needs to talk to the county commissioners. I can't talk today, but they can't just decide to move students around based on that weighted need that they've decided. And then as far as the legal and ethical concerns, so legally, like we've said, it's misfeasance. It goes against the Leandro ruling. And then for the ethical side of things, it's unethical to try to take money from one group of students and give it to another group of students.
That is correct.
I don't think Jennifer has logged in, so I'll take over
Okay.
her slides. So for justice, when we look at the paradigms, we said that he's trying to get equity. I mean, he's trying to do the right thing with the student-based budget, but he's not doing it ethically. If he was doing it that way, then he would have looked at some of those other ways of budgeting that were talked about in the resource management. He would have gone through that process with back and forth with the school board. This isn't the way to do it. With care, he wanted to have shared decision-making with principals in the community, which is commendable. And he wanted to use transparency to gain trust from family and communities, which also is commendable. With critique, we said trying to address the needs of underrepresented students is great, but he didn't go about it the right way. And so it's showing favoritism because he was taking from one group, giving to another. We also talked about calling this the Robin Hood case study. And from profession, we said the best interest of one group of students needs to be for all students, and transparency, which also connects to what happened in Chapel Hill Carborough with the superintendent moving money and trying to do essentially the same thing, and then lost
Exactly
her.
the same thing.
Yep, lost her job for it. So, and I think that about wraps it up for us, guys.
Yeah. Great. Great. You've started to put these together. And see, that's the tricky part of school law is you got to pull all these different pieces and kind of put it all together and make sense. And so I'll try to be brief here. In the late 80s, we began to see, as a result of Reaganomics, we began to see states begin to compete to get businesses. The first one in North and South Carolina to have a big impact was the BMW plant in Greer, South Carolina. Everybody knows they make BMWs in Greer. Well, that was a game changer, but the state of South Carolina had to give BMW, what was it, $400 million to get them to come in tax incentives. And that was the shot out over the bow. That was in the late 80s, mid-late 80s. That plant was opened by what, 1989, 90, they opened that plant. But that was the first time that a state had, in North and South Carolina, had given out big money to a company to relocate to their area in order to get jobs. You say, Dale, what's that got to do with this case? Remembering, as Mary pointed out, that the states got out of building school buildings in '66 when desegregation happened. That put all the burden on these local districts to keep buildings and keep them up. And so that the county commissioners were giving them having to give dollars to do that. Where do county commissioners get the money for schools? They get it from two things: property taxes and business or corporate property taxes on businesses in their area. That's where school money comes from. And all of a sudden, probably your biggest revenue stream in a lot of rural counties just went by the wayside when the state said, wait a minute, we need that money we're giving to schools, these locals that are given to schools. We need to declare them not to have to pay that money so we can attract more businesses to come. And all of a sudden, every time we give an economic incentive, whether it's state or local, like a county, every time they give an economic incentive for a business, that's direct, I mean, dollar for dollar, taking it out of the school budget. Rutherford County, I'm in the very northwestern part tonight at Lake Lure, but along the way, down at the other end of the county that I pass by on my way to Gardner Webb every day when I'm going this way is the new Facebook plant. Facebook is down near the North Carolina Data Center. The county of Rutherford, which is a very low wealth county that just went under when textiles left. In 1980, when I was a high school teacher in the county, over 85% of the people in the county worked in textiles. That's all there was. That and one Broy Hill furniture plant. Well, we know what happened to furniture and we know what happened to textiles. And so they made they took the newest old mill, the one that was built the latest, the J.C. Cowan plant out on 74 bypass, bought the property, tore it down, improved the property, gave it to Facebook, and then no taxes. And so, and they got 25 minimum wage jobs out of it. And so now they're on the brink of insolvency again. When you give this money away, it takes it directly from schools. And so the low wealth district said, we need help. We don't have the ability to tax ourselves more or won't tax ourselves more in order to put more in schools. At that time, it was $7,000 per pupil. It's 8 now. And the state said, this is all it takes to get a basic education. And that's all the basic ed plan of 84 says is child has to get a basic education. We think this is how much money it takes to get that education. And the low wealth people said, yeah, but Charlotte Mecklenburg is adding another 4,000 to that. And so they're spending 11 and we're spending 7. And so what they wanted, and I put this in the chat, by the way, they wanted district power equalizing. That is a funding formula. Rather than the flat formula, you get, you got 1,000 students, you get $7,000 per student for 700,000. What they said was, or 7 million, excuse me. What they said is we want district power equalizing, where the amount of money that we give you is based on the local wealth. Well, after 4 years or 3.5, 4 years, they said no, but said we will give you the lottery. That's what the lottery is for, which we've seen no impact from the lottery. It's only pork barrel projects through the lottery, one-off capital projects. And by the time they pay the winners, the company that administrates it and do all that, there really is no money left. So the lottery's made no difference. And so Leandro keeps getting revisited because students still aren't getting what they're being promised, but in the end, you can't manipulate federal, state, or local money. Federal money comes, it's earmarked for that student, can't move it. State money, same way. Local money, you have some control, but it would have to go through the Board of Education. And we know how unlikely boards of education are to manipulate money, which leads to my story for the night called the Gang of Four. The Gang of Four probably was in the last video. Got elected in Charlotte Mecklenburg in the 90s, over $6 million. They acted like $6 million was all the money in the world. High school challenge for the 3 lowest high schools in the district. They the commissioners had allotted $6 million. The school board asked for and got $6 million, $2 million each to work in those high schools to try to do some things to get their graduation rate up and their dropout rate down, and et cetera. It's West Charlotte, West Meck, and Gary. Those 4 people ran on a platform of $6 million. They acted like it was all the money that had ever been in the world, minted since the beginning of time, $6 million. At that time, the budget in Charlotte Mecklenburg was $1.4 billion. It was less than 1/10 of 1% of the budget, and they made it sound like it was all the money in the world. They got elected and promptly stopped the money. So that's what I mean. Unless the board recommends and the county commissioners fund it, you can't even move local money. And that's exactly what happened in Chapel Hill, Carborough, where the superintendent there said, we need to redirect some of our resources to these, but she knew that neither the board nor especially the county commissioners would not go for that. So she used discretionary money, except you can't do that. You only have up to 90,000. And she did a contract for $1 million and had them send invoices for slightly less than 90,000, but that's a one-time thing. She manipulated the system and in violation of the Leandro ruling, which says not only does the state have no duty to regulate the money or change it, you can't do it either at the local level. You're expressly forbidden from doing what she did. That's what that Duke Leandro case is, and that's the thing you've got to understand is even if you want to, you're not allowed to. We have stopped that. And so the point of this case is you got to follow the law. It doesn't matter how commonsensical it is, doesn't matter how wonderful it is, or if it's the right thing or the ethical thing or A, B, C, D, does not matter. You must follow the law. Federal money follows kids. State money comes per pupil. And you don't even get it all in a lump sum. As you know, I told you, it's divided into 10 payments and you get it after the first month. You got to have an operating budget to do that. And so if you don't spend it correctly, guess what the state does to it? They just turn the tap off. That's what they call flip the switch. If you get it and you don't do the right thing, or if you violate the Leandro law, the Leandro ruling, you don't get money the next month, because you're always, the first month you pay out of your pocket and they reimburse. You pay, they reimburse. And so if you misspend it, you've not misspent their money, you've misspent yours, and they won't give it back to you. Your money's now gone. And so that's how that works. But in the end, what the superintendent wanted to do might have been a fine thing. But again, just like we, as administrators, we have to follow the law. We don't make the law. Just like you folks are curriculum instruction specialists, you're wonderful. But you know, you're all about, and what we have to be about in schools is how to teach, not what to teach. That's a political argument above our pay grade, and we can't change that. It's the same thing with this. That's a political argument above our pay grade. I was on the legal team that lost the Leandro case. Full disclosure. And it sometimes, sometimes the good guys don't always win. Elections have consequences. Fill in the blank, insert metaphor here. What you and I might see as equity, other people see as welfare. And that's pretty much the argument that we've gotten into, is that we don't want to give people a hand up. We consider that to be a handout. Now, understanding that for every $1 in North Carolina, for every $1 of social welfare that we do, we give $10 in corporate welfare. That's the irony of all of this. That's just, that one, certain political groups just have no shame. That's just a complete, the irony of that is overwhelming to me. That the very people who rant and rave against social welfare, helping people out, have no problem with giving 10 times as much in corporate welfare so that rich people can get richer. I don't understand it. I just really don't. And so excellent job on this one. You got to put together, you got to understand how the money flows, federal dollars, state dollars, local dollars, what they're intended to be spent for. So that leads me to this week's activity. When you go and look for the local budget, yes, I responded back. Budgets to one of our folks. Yes, budgets have to be, they have to be public. They can't just be, we'll look for it, 2 weeks later. They have to be public so that we can see where all the dollars goes and people can walk in and ask for it. But we have to track that as school administrators. We have to know where the money is, what we're doing with it. And we have to be careful not to misspend money or do things that we shouldn't be doing, even though we might be on the side of the angels. Dr. Laws, thank you for joining us this evening. And so I will turn it over to you for your thoughts on the Leandro case before we get to our second presentation.
Okay, and I don't know what you said. I was meeting with a 605 MELS group and for 10 minutes and then made my way over. So welcome everybody. It's good to see you. I hope you're doing as well as you can. I'm looking at Rebecca, who seems to be sitting outside and looks like she's cold, but it's 63 degrees, but it is windy. So anyway, I guess this must mean you have some kind of school duty tonight, Rebecca. But
Beta Club.
Yeah. So it must be a soccer game on Tuesday? No, but
it's trunk or treat.
Oh, that's even better. Okay. Well, that is good. So talking about Leandro, one of the things that, and Dale may have addressed this. So one of the outcomes of it, first of all, the law. One of the things that I learned as a superintendent that is a hard thing for us to grasp, and Dale alluded to this. The law is not right or wrong. So when a judge makes a determination, it's human nature for us to say that's not right. And I've thankfully I hadn't lost many, but I have lost a couple. I've been on the losing side of a couple of cases. Dale has too, because that's part of the nature. And you leave because you were so sure that you had a winning case, and you want to be angry, and you have to embrace this. The judge is making an interpretation of the law. That's what it is. And it is not whether it's, sometimes the judge will make an interpretation of the law that nauseates the judge. But still, the judge is making an interpretation of the law. So that's one of the things that we have to bear in mind when we have legal procedures or proceedings. So that's the first thing. Leandro was an interesting case. So I'm over here on the west side of North Carolina. Now, Gaston County is just west of Charlotte, and but I was at the time, well, not at the time of Leandro, but soon to be thereafter in the northwest Piedmont of North Carolina. And so one of the interesting things, the offshoots of Leandro is they designated monies to go to districts. And again, our South Carolina friends, and you know, South Carolina did it to a certain extent with corridor shame, but they probably didn't take it on as aggressively as North Carolina did. But when those of us that were not affected by Leandro, which were the 5 school districts, the next step in the process of the law was, wait a minute, if you're saying that students who live in poverty need access to resources more than some districts can give them, then we all have them. So Wilkes County, North Carolina, just down the hill from Leah, we have plenty of students who live in poverty. Leah can tell you that even, you know, everybody thinks the mountains are beautiful and everybody up there has all kinds of resources, and the mountains are beautiful. That half of that is true, but there is a lot of poor up in the mountains. And so the superintendents at the time got together and said, we have students in poverty too. So then the legislature went back and came up with a fund called the Disadvantaged Student Supplemental Fund, DSSF. And it was probably, Dale, the best pot of money that we got, because there was flexibility to it. And we got this pot of money and said, and the legislature said, as long as it is addressing the disadvantaged student, you have flexibility how you want to spend it. And I've got to tell you, friends, this is going back many years, but some of you will remember this maybe, and some of you may not. But at Wilkes County, I brought my principals in, and we divided it up per pupil to every school, and we said, write a plan. And it was the neatest thing. And think about this in your world. If your district said to any one of you at your school, write a plan. You've got this amount of money. We told them how much they got. And as Dale said, it is public record. Here is how much money. So Wilkes County got this money now. It's been 10 years this December when I retired, so I can't remember exactly how much it was, but it was in the millions, well into the millions. And so then you divide it per pupil. And then I would go to each school and say, here's how much money you have. We didn't keep any of it at the district, nor should we have. And we said, here's your money, write a plan. And then they would bring the plan to us for us to present to the board. And again, the key, as Dale will say, if you write a plan and that says you will spend it this way, then you better spend it this way, because the money is trackable. And so but all that being said, it was the one step, Dale, that I thought was a step in the right direction, that really gave control back to the schools where it ought to be. Steve Laws, as the superintendent, shouldn't say, here's how we're going to spend the money. The schools were able to do that, and Wilkes County really benefited from that. So that's an offshoot from Leandro. He talked about the lottery. That's when I was coming in. I do want you to know, all of you North Carolinians that are here tonight, except for Ann, the lottery is one of the great facades of all time. And what is humorous about this is that when I became a superintendent, North Carolina had this funding stream in place called the corporate tax. And the corporate tax was a percentage on corporations in the state that went to facility improvement. It was capital money. And so the state sold the lottery that it would help with capital expenditures in the state of North Carolina. That's what its purpose was, among other things, which was great. But the legislature then went and said, okay, we're going to eliminate the corporate tax. So after the lottery came into play, Wilkes County got, like, I'm thinking right at $1 million, maybe $900,000 in corporate tax money. We lost all of that and replaced it with lottery money, which was 700 and some thousand. So we lost money on the lottery. And the legislature is sitting there saying, look what we've done for the school. And so corporate welfare, I was smiling when Dale said that. That's exactly what this is. They gave it back to the corporations, took it from the schools that needed it. I just wanted you to know that as you pursue administration, when your superintendent and your central office says, you know, we can't afford this, believe it or not, sometimes they're telling you the truth. And what you have the right to do is exactly what Dale said. You have the right to see it budgetarily. Let me see how this works. And there were times when I can give you a litany of things I did wrong, but I had a group of principals that came in and we went page by page by page showing them the budget. And they became the strongest advocates of, this is what we got. We showed them everything we had, and then we tried, and so even our harshest critics would admit that we spent the money the way we said we were going to spend it. That's my sermon. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. What Steve was talking about, facade, that's what we were, our con. The lottery turned out to be a con. It in effect replaced money and gave money back to corporations, but Wilkes County was probably, if they only lost 20% on that deal, they were better. We lost about 50% in Charlotte-Mecklenburg.
That is true, Dale. And the metropolitan areas lost more than the small
and the rural areas. So that switch, and they were like, we're going to do this, and again, it's a part of that Reaganomics notion of trickle down economics, that if you quit taxing corporations, that it will spur economic growth and they'll pay their workers better. And pardon me if I laugh before I could get either of those out. That we know is a complete hoax, that none of that stuff actually works. Trickle down economics is not a thing. It's like a snipe hunt, or it's not a thing. But that's what we did. But the problem was, the poorer you were, fortunately, the less money you lost. But by the time Leandro was decided, I was out of the poor West, Rutherford and Burke, and I was in the wealthy Mecklenburg. I was in Charlotte by then. When Leandro was decided in '97, I had gone to greener pastures. But we lost half of our budget. We lost half. He lost 20%. We lost 50%. Can you imagine the sweeping cuts that we got? I lost all my remedial teachers. I lost all of my reading, and I lost all my reloop. I lost everything as a high school principal in '97, '98. I lost everything. I mean, our budget got cut in half from that particular part. But, because we had to shift money from programs to capital to fulfill all of our capital needs. You said, yeah, this was nope. The local money, you can decide what you're going to put it into. And so we lost huge programs. We lost people. We lost staff. We lost teachers. We lost. It was, and the worst part, and I was a part of this. I told you, I'm still Saul on the road to Damascus. I'm trying to. If I get into heaven, it's going to be like Indiana Jones rolling under the gate. I'm going to try my best to get in. I'm trying to do better. But I can tell you what we did. And
I hope that gate has a wide opening at the bottom.
It's got to be up about this high for me to get in, because I don't bend very well. I'm now to the point where I'm as round as I am tall. They make me wear stripes so they can tell if I'm walking or rolling. That's a handy piece of information to have if you're downhill from me, as big as I am. But we cut as a result, direct result, we cut 200 curriculum instruction people. We called it the Renaissance. We should have called it the bloodbath. We emptied out an entire building. That's what we had to do as a result of this. That trade, what looked like an even trade and money, one's funded. No, it was not an even trade. We lost half. And we called it the Renaissance. And we let all of our content coaches, curriculum coaches, instructional support specialists, we lost them all. ALL. We cleaned out the entire 5th floor of the Stonewall Center. We cleaned out over off of Moorhead at that little element. We had a place over there. All of them gone. 200 those 200 people. We had to do, that were paid locally. We had to let go, and they were all instruction. That happened in 1999. Happened in 1998, 99 as a result of what Steve was just talking about. The first year it was all the programs. Second year.
So one of the things that and again, these are just little tidbits, and I know we'll get into some more discussion of case stuff, but one of the things you have to remember is Dale's talking about all these people who lost jobs, and you've heard us say that you have capital budget, you have current expense budget, and you have local budget, and they're 3 different entities, and so the people come out of the current expense and the local, and so we're sitting there saying, well, why is that being used for capital? One of the things you have to remember is that debt service, you can't just say I'm not going to pay what I owe.
Yes.
So you're using funds to pay debt service on these buildings that you have, or the renovations that you've done, or even the capital expenditures for the heavy dollar things, technology and otherwise, the wiring, the fact that your roofs aren't leaking, those kinds of things. But mostly we're talking about school construction. And you've got those over a 20 or 30 year, most time 20 payback schedule. And so when times get tight and monies get withdrawn from the school district, you can't just say, well, I just won't pay this because I need to keep paying people. We would prefer to keep paying people, but as you know, the lenders tend to be rather aggressive in coming to get you, and it would be very embarrassing for a school district to say we can't make our payments this month. So that's one of the issues that Dale's talking about. But I know we want to get to other stuff, but I think what Dale and I are trying to tell you is that for the consumer, and that would be all of us, it is easy to infer that something's shady going on here. And I would just encourage it. I'm not saying that there isn't stuff that's shady. I hope there's not, but what I can say is that, remember we talked early on, when budgets come out, the money can be tracked all the way down to the individual student. It can be tracked. And if I and I hope you know I wouldn't, but if I wanted to try to do something illegal, it is easily traceable if somebody will take the time to do it. And you who want it, so every time Dale says you do this, you can go to jail. Every time he wants to bring up the downside to being an administrator, the upside is you better be good at cheating because it is easily trackable. So quit worrying about it. Do what is right. Do what the law says to do. And nobody can come and they're not going to come in and say, you did this wrong and you're getting fired or you're going to jail, when you can show, no, here's the money, here's how we did it, and this is abiding by the law. So it really, you know, I never worried about, I mean, people would always say, well, he's got money, he's just spending it somewhere else. I never worried about that because I knew I could prove it every time. And you have that same peace of mind. The way the system works is quite protective of you as an administrator.
Elizabeth made just a great point is Judge Manning in 2006 said what was going on, especially in Charlotte, Mecklenburg, was akin to genocide, that we had thrown away a whole generation of students when this happened and we had to let all these people go and we had to cut programs back and the lottery and all of the hoax of it and all of that, we just basically threw a generation of kids away. I told you, Charlotte Mecklenburg, they said, you know, we're going to put the money in this and all these things have to go. The first year, it's always programs. You know, you have to get rid of recurring costs when you get a big budget cut, things that cost you every year. Well, programs, you know, is the first thing that go because, you know, usually it's not as many people. But if you're losing that same amount of money every year, and that's what happened, you know, in Wilkes County, you had a 20% reduction every year. That's ongoing. In Charlotte Mecklenburg, we had a 50% reduction ongoing. What's also ongoing? That'd be salaries. And so that's the real life part of this is even though the local is responsible for capital, they can't not pay their bills. And so they have to start cutting positions so that they can pay those capital, that they have to pay the power bill. They have to pay the debt service. They have to put roofs on buildings. They have to do those things. And where we, even though those might be one-off things, we cut the recurring stuff. So because once we cut it, we don't have to keep on cutting it every year. You know, we get that money every year once we cut that salary. And so that's what happens. So all these things have repercussions. Now, the thing to remember, as Steve said, if you're being honest with the money and following the law, but if you try to pull a stunt like I don't know if I would call it, if you do something like the superintendent in Chapel Hill, Carrboro did, and she had the best intentions in mind. And she knew that the state wasn't going to give her the money for those poor kids over in Carrboro, and the federal government wasn't going to give her, and the local board was not going to put it in their budget, nor were the county commissioners, you know, were the commissioners that are going to fund it. But she felt like she needed to get them some help. They did let her resign. They did pursue legal means against the finance officer, who actually did get convicted. I think just got probation in the case. But that's what we're talking about is if you intentionally do something that you're not supposed to, but as long as you know you're following the law and doing the right things. But if you decide I'm going to take the law in my own hands, I believe these kids, I'm on the side of the angels here. I'm a good guy. I'm taking from the rich in Chapel Hill and giving to the poor in Carrboro. It will not go well for you. That's just the notion here. All right, we're ready for our second group to present. Mary's put us on a time clock tonight, Steve. That's our issue.
Well, we'll make up for that and we'll breeze through ours. Anne, could you present? I'm having some internet struggles this evening.
Yes.
I feel like our group aligns much more closely than we did last week, which is good. All right, let's get started. So we kind of covered the case study and did the background there. Keep going. We did some research from our text. Rebecca found some really good external resource about specifically how much revenue we get from each of our 4 sources. But we felt that legal compliance was the key here. And since we kind of missed the key last week, we wanted to make sure we got it this week. Let's keep going. So we summarized Leandro versus the state in 1994, the 5 low wealth counties in North Carolina. They were arguing that they paid more in taxes, but the students received less than the other counties. Keep going. And that basically a child's education shouldn't depend on them being born in poor areas, but it should be more equitably distributed. And so the Supreme Court ruled exactly what the other group said, that we have the responsibility to provide a sound education, but that we don't have that we aren't obligated to provide equal funding in the way that was being argued. So we summarized what was kind of meant by a sound basic education. And Rebecca found and kind of educated me about the critical needs from this West Ed report, including finance and resources, which were pretty kind of important to kind of weave in here, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Rebecca, is there anything you wanted to add here?
I'm going to be quick because they're starting karaoke. So basically, after they have a lot of videos, they come together, they explain the case, they explain what's going on with verdicts and things like that. This West Ed report is basically a group of educators and what they feel is important to have funds being properly used and properly divvied and everything like that. And this is where, with the critical needs, what they wanted to focus on. And I think there's 8, 10, I can't remember, but there's more on the next page. So like they were comparing what they have, what they get with North Carolina funds, what they want to see more of.
Okay.
And so we kind of ended with arguing for both sides that no, it's not appropriate because it's not legal, but that the way the superintendent was thinking was appropriate, and that he or she, like, we need to think about how to legally address these inequities in funding so that we can meet the needs of all students.
Mhm.
We also looked at the paradigms of justice, the first one being justice. And we said that what the superintendent attempted was not fair because North Carolina law has already determined what is considered fair. The standard has already been set, so the district can't set a different standard. The intentions may have been aimed correctly, but the attempt at the action was arbitrary and I can't say that.
Capricious.
Capricious. As far as the paradigm of care, as far as like loyalty and trust go, when the public is presented with this letter from the superintendent, there should be a level of trust expected that what he is suggesting is legal. So basically, he's getting a lot of people behind him on an idea that sounds really great, but it's misleading because he should have done his research before he presented this to people. You look like you have something to say right there, Dr. Lamb. You want me to
I
pause?
was, in my example there is Malcolm Graham. And so we'll come back to Malcolm Graham in just a minute, but that's exactly right. When people, politicians, when people in positions of authority start something like this, a lot of folks assume that they know what they're talking about, or that it is legal, that it's okay. We just need to get it done, get behind it and get it done, not understanding that, no, what they're trying to do is to popular opinion. They're trying to influence law or change policy. That's not what, and see, people need to know that, but that's what they're doing. And so the classic example is several years back, there was a gentleman in Charlotte, Mecklenburg by the name of Malcolm Graham, and he ran to get into state legislature from the North Charlotte area based on his promise that when he got to the state house, that he was going to get more money to build more and fix up and build better schools in North Charlotte. What's wrong with that pledge or promise? What does the state not do? They do not fund what?
Cool, buildings.
Buildings. But that was his campaign platform, and people voted for him for one term. And then when he got there, I'm not sure Malcolm knew, when he got there and found out, oh, wait a minute, the state doesn't fund buildings, it doesn't improve,
Right.
it doesn't do capital. And not only can we not fix up the old ones, we can't build any new ones. And so he was a one-termer. But he convinced people in that district to vote for him based on something that was an absolute falsehood, was actually against the law. So yes, I think that's an excellent point here. That we
And I
have
guess it's similar to the guys who you said acted like that 9 million was all the money in the world,
6 million.
but proportionally, they, they were just, it was misleading
They were
data.
being disingenuous. That is correct. It was not all
Um,
the money in the world. It was less than 1/10 of 1% of the budget. But they
Any one of
convinced
us
people.
would take $6 million, so it sounds like a whole lot.
Exactly. It sounds like a lot of money, but I knew one of the fellows who was part of the Gang of Four. I knew him socially. They fully knew that that this was not an accidental misrepresentation. Let me be
Right.
clear here. They intentionally did that and basically betting on the fact that people wouldn't know what percentage that was, that it would sound like a lot of money to them personally, but wouldn't realize that it was basically throwaway money in that kind of budget. That I mean, they were banking on people's stupidity in the rural areas of the county.
Manipulating loyalty and trust.
Mm-hmm.
So then we also pointed out that the concern for the offset equity was clear, and the superintendent was connecting with his audience. So we're just acknowledging that, well, truthfully, we don't really know what the superintendent's agenda was. And maybe it was to change policy. But he was not being upfront with that, if that was his
Right.
agenda. There was a lack of evidence to support collaboration and shared decision-making by the superintendent. That's what we kind of thought. I noticed that the other group did feel that the superintendent did use collaboration and shared decision-making, but I didn't necessarily see that there was evidence to support that. But I could be wrong there. That last one I can't read because y'all's faces are in the way. The superintendent may have had a lot of support from the public, but it wouldn't have changed the outcome. So that goes along with what his agenda was, why he was trying to get support from the public. Critique, power here. The superintendent did not have this power that he was soliciting that he had. This case is an adequate struggle against currently existing power structures. Social classes were put in jeopardy. And it could have been viewed as an adequate action to offset the offense. Yes. Human rights are being violated, but by both sides of this scenario. And then for ethical of profession, we just put, you must know the law for all of these things. You must know the law before you can solicit your agenda. And in conclusion, it says the superintendent must know the laws around money allocation and not make false promises to the community.
All right, excellent. Do we have any, you can go ahead and stop your share. Do we have any history majors? Do we have any history majors in the group tonight? Nobody, so everybody's actually literate then, so I won't have to explain too much. All right, let me go through this. All right, everybody remembers the Scopes trial from when you were a child. What was the Scopes trial? It was about teaching creationism. Remember Tennessee? Actually, it was simply a trumped up thing to try to get the Butler Amendment, 25th Amendment, Butler Amendment appealed in Tennessee, which said you couldn't teach creationism. And so the Scopes trial was really just, you need a test case at the local level. When you go from the district court to state court to a circuit court to the federal Supreme Court, I mean, you're always on appeal. You got to lose a case. You got to lose a local case, then you appeal it to the higher level. And what they were trying to do in Tennessee was, I don't think John Scopes actually ever taught a lesson that man was evolved from monkeys. But he was actually not even in school that day. But they needed a test case. So he got convicted, and then they could appeal it on up the line. And eventually, his conviction was vacated when they found that he wasn't in school. But when this was one of those Clarence Darrow, William Jennings Bryan, great national debate kind of things. If you haven't read about the Scopes trial, go back and read about it. But the notion here is, even if you are trying, as the last group, as Ann suggested, which is certainly a plausible thing in this case, that the superintendent is implying that he can do this, but he's trying to get a test case out there to fight this notion of, that he can't move money around in terms of need rather than simply attendance as it is now. We fund on attendance now, not on enrollment, but attendance, average daily membership, to get that change to need. But even if you're doing that, you understand that you're going to be a martyr, as the superintendent was in Chapel Hill, Carrboro. We could argue that she should have known better, and with the idea, and she basically in her defense said, I was trying to do the right thing. I was hoping, to change things, but you got to go through the court system to change things. You can't really, I know that we've seen a lot of politics lately where we try to change laws through the court of public opinion. That's been happening a lot lately. But truly, if you want to change laws, you have to go through the proper procedure. You have to go through district court, state court, circuit court, and then federal courts. You have to go in that process. You can't just all of a sudden decide you're going to do something and hope that it sticks. You have to work your way through these things. Now, the problem is in South Carolina and North Carolina right now, with the majorities that are in those governing bodies, there is no push to equalize funding for kids in school. It's quite the opposite. The push is charters and vouchers, which is the opposite of what we're talking about. That's the push right now. And so I don't think if you decide, well, I'm going to do something like this and hopefully I can win in court down the road, I don't think that's going to happen right now. You have to be able to read the room here, folks. And so find your budgets, know what's in them, know what you can spend, understand that you can't, even in your own school, you can't give this group money in exclusion of that group, even in your own school. Every child is supposed to get that basic education. Now, Rebecca mentioned West Ed, that group. West Ed, basically what they're trying to do is define what is that basic education that the state says you're supposed to get, that Leandro alluded to. The basic education plan of 1983/84 said child gets a basic education. And Leandro went back 15 years later and said basic education. Well, what the West Ed group is trying to say is, what is a basic education? This is what we believe it ought to be. We don't believe you're meeting these standards. And they've gained some traction, but they're not, West Ed is not going to change the funding formula. It's simply going to try to say, we need this much for a basic ed versus that much is all they're doing. But West Ed, there is still no movement afoot to move from a flat grant formula where you get $7,000 or $8,000 per pupil, period, to a district power equalizing where we give you the amount of state money that we give you is based on your wealth or your need. There is still no movement. People misconstrue what West Ed is. West Ed is not trying to change the funding formula. They're trying to get a more modern and more realistic interpretation of what a basic education is and how much it costs to pay for that. That's what they're trying to do. So don't go down that rabbit hole of West Ed's going to change y'all. No, they're not. They're working within the existing system to try to better define what basic education is. And so that's it. All right. Dr. Steve, your input.
Well, so I'm going to go down another rabbit hole. And one of the things that we've talked about in here before is this idea, we need to take care of what is the basic education and fund it. So we have X amount of dollars. And until the legislature in North or South Carolina changes that, then we still have X amount of dollars. And where I think we as school districts really have to address this conundrum is, how do we disperse it so that every population feels like they are getting what they need in school? So you have the basic piece, but you also have people who need other pieces beyond the basic. And how do we fund that, and how do we meet those needs? And as we've said in here before, we have failed the gifted population. We have failed, in my opinion, the ESL or second language population. And we can just list group after group. So I don't want to shortchange anybody. We've got to get back to, we have X amount of money. And as long as it's taxpayer money, and the legislature can control this, we're not going to get any more funding. So we've got to take what we've got and figure out how to disperse it to meet the needs of everybody. And I would argue that, we've left pockets of populations behind. And it's not just the argument from the Bush administration in 2001, no child left behind. I would argue we've left every child behind. And so I think part of that is that we have, in truth, listened to forces outside the classroom to tell us how to address the needs of every child. And I don't know how we bring it back, but I'm going to give my editorial comment now, Dale, which is probably sooner than it should be. But I tell the EDLS people, why do you get a doctorate? And my argument is that U10, I know a couple aren't with us now. Any student who goes through EDCI, any student goes through EDLS, you have a real opportunity, if you choose to do it, to develop a new structure. I believe the doctorate is going to, because I think public schools are going to take a whole different look in the next 5 years. And I think some of you will be creating your own schools. I really believe that. And because, you know, we can have great disdain for charter schools, and we can have great disdain for vouchers. And I understand that because I am wholeheartedly a public school person. But you can read what's happening. And if that's happening and funding's going to come in different forms, then I believe some of you will form your own school. And that excites me. It excites me because I believe, you know, Dale and I talked, when I was coming home from the funeral today, I said, my biggest lament for this group is we never got to come together. This is our forum. But if we were together, the discussions we would have been profound, because every one of you has ideas of how to improve what we do. And just think about it. If you have the chance to develop a school, you know, in conjunction with other people, it won't be a solo thing. Of what can we do to address the needs of this child, this child, this child, whether it's a second language child or a gifted child or a special needs child or a child from high poverty or just an average Joe, which I think would classify most of us. Or you wouldn't be Joes. Dale and I would be Joes. But you know what I'm talking about. We most of us came from middle class folks, either low to middle or you know, low middle, high middle, right? You know, most of us came from that. And we have a real opportunity. That's why I'm on a tangent here, Dale, but I think the funding piece is going to alter what public schools look like. And I want you all, no matter what I want, I pray that all of you envision this opportunity to change the way we deliver for children. And we have a real chance to do that. And some of you are going to, you know, you're married to a K-12 setting that we are all used to and we all will fight for. But if it's going to change, then you take it and make something great with it, because I think we have a real chance to do that. That's it. But I'm not through. We're not to 8 o'clock yet. But of course, Dale may let you out early.
Yeah, I'm gonna let them out early tonight. I've already promised them that. We gotta make up some, we'll do, we're good on the finance piece. We're probably gonna be here next week. We're gonna do some follow-up to the case and do some covering some discipline things. But one of the things that I hope going forward is we will kind of change our tact in terms of how we've traditionally done things in education when things weren't equitable. Pretty much what we've done up until fairly recently is we said, this group's got this and we've got this and we want what they got. The response is, well, we'll just take that from them. So you'll both have less. That's kind of the way that we've done public education ever since the very beginning. When there were inequities, you know, that's really what the Leandro case was about. They got more than us. We want you to pull them back down here with us, you know, but maybe we can both rise up a little bit. But the whole notion of what the low wealth people wanted, they wanted to pull the high wealth people down and in order to raise themselves up. We got to quit that. That's my point. We got to quit it. We've got to quit. We'll pull somebody else. If they got more than us, then, you know, we'll just take theirs so you both don't have anything. That's kind of the way we've done public school funding and the way we've run schools forever. And Lee makes a good point. Winners don't have to make losers. That is correct. But we've seen it as we have seen school as a net sum game. That you know, public schools, we must take private schools. We must take charter schools. That, folks, it can't be that way. Going forward, we've got to stop. Just like this perpetual lie that I hear about, well, once kids go over to charter schools, they get all their money for the year. No, they don't. They get it for 1 month if they're there on the roll. But after that, it comes back with them to the school. I mean, those are the kinds of things we have basically fought ourselves, is my point. And we're going to have to stop that. And we're going to have to stop the addition by subtraction deal where we tear somebody else down to pull ourselves up. And that was the whole notion of the Leandro case. It was simply a Robin Hood move. We won't take from them. Yeah, we want more, but we won't take from them. When we should have been talking about we need more money coming in for everybody rather than just taking from them. And that's what Wested is all about, is we got to have more. Basically, this is what an education is. And we need the state to fund it. We don't need you to take money from somebody else to fund it. You need to put more money in it. You need to quit giving it all back to corporations so rich people can get richer. Mark Zuckerberg does not need to be that many $1 billion more richer than he is now because he doesn't pay anything in Rutherford County. The county spent $20 million giving him the facility, and he pays no taxes in perpetuity. And they got 25 jobs in custodial maintenance and security, all minimum wage. That's what they got. And so, to Steve's point, we got to stop. We've got to have some new models that serve kids, and it can't be based on what we do to other people, or we can't keep cannibalizing. There's got to be a new influx of new dollars, and people have got to start paying rather than us fighting inside the business for what few scraps there are. And hopefully that's what you folks will do. That's it. All right, does anybody have anything else tonight? I promise you we get out early tonight because we may have to go late next week. We'll talk about discipline next week. And so your case for next week is Jimmy and Willie. It's an LGBTQ case, but it's also about discipline. And look at reporting laws, look at discipline, look at your standard code, look at your code of conduct for your district, look at the disciplinary data reporting manual. That's the biggie. The disciplinary data reporting manual, all this stuff is there for you in next week's. But Jimmy and Willie, yeah, it's a social issue. Yeah, it's about students' rights and LGBTQ, but it's also about discipline. It's about due process. It's about all of those things kind of roll. Remember, these cases are multifaceted. They're like diamonds. They're not just single plane. They're multi-dimensional kinds of things. So make sure you look at all that stuff, and we'll spend some time on that next week. All right. I don't have anything else, as I promised. Mary, before we started, before even Mary asked that we would get out early tonight, as I told you last week, we would not do a secondary lesson tonight. We'd simply do the case studies, and they go a lot faster. After the first one, when I don't have to roast anybody, it goes a lot better for everybody. I will see you all next week. Everybody stay safe. Thank you for joining us tonight. Good night.